quickly. So they're the three presentations in the middle. I'll just do the intro and the closing. Then, as usual, just with the Teams etiquette, please obviously feel comfortable. If you are comfortable, turn on your video. It's nice to see people, but if you aren't comfortable, don't stress. When there are presentations going on, please mute yourself. Obviously, we do welcome questions, although depending on which speaker it is, they might prefer that you hold the questions to the end. So you could consider just putting it in the chat or raising your hand. We'll see which is the best, depending on the presenter. Yeah, we want this to be interactive and engaging. So please do feel comfortable. Then please, if you can, just scan either of these or both of the QR codes. The survey, just do that at the end. I'll put it back on at the end. We really do appreciate positive and negative feedback just to try and make the events more suited to the audience. So please feel free to give us that feedback on the overall content, the overall organization, presentations, anything that you might feel is relevant. And then if you are willing to volunteer to do a presentation, you can also indicate that in the survey. So that's the greeny colored QR code. Then on the yellow side is the GitHub repository. Just scan that and join that so that you can get the content from all of our presentations. All right, and then just a quick one before we hand over to the speakers. We're here, 30th of October, second last event of the year. Obviously, you can see it's online only. Next month, it's our last of the year. It's a hybrid event. It's the 27th of November. I will just give you advance notice. You definitely want to diarize that event, the 27th of November, as well as our first event of next year, the 29th of January. The reason why I extend into January is because Kellen and I are organizing a two-event series, AI functionality by the top BI vendors or analytics vendors. So we've got two vendors in November and two in January. So that's Click, SAP Analytics Cloud, Tableau, and then Microsoft. So all four going to be doing presentations, two on the one event, two on the next event, AI and data analytics. So I think that's going to be fantastic. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Okay. So that's where we are right there. I'm going to stop sharing now. Nolo, are you ready to go? If so, I'm just going to introduce you. Well, I know you've got your own introduction there for yourself. So anyway, Nolo works with me at Sador, and I'm delighted that you can help us with the news today. So the Power BI news specifically. So please go for it. Thanks very much.
Good day, everyone. So I'm going to be doing the Power BI news for October. Anyway, so in short, there are a few updates this month, but some really good ones. On the agenda, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself, do the news, and I'll share a useful link at the end. My name is Letloho Nolo Mdawu, also known as Nolo. I'm a BI consultant at Sador Analytics. There's my email address in case you want to get in contact with me, as well as my LinkedIn URL. So just some general mentions. Big maps are on their way out. They are still visible in the visual pane, but it's time to start switching to Azure Maps in your reports. This is something we've been doing in our company. It doesn't take a lot of time, and I think we should all just start jumping to Azure Maps before they completely phase it out. Power BI and PowerPoint got better. The embedded controller has been improved for smoother, more interactive presentations. And there's a bunch of new visualizations that dropped this month that are worth exploring. So just to start with the features for this month. This first one is actually not a feature, but I thought this is something that I should add into the presentation. Fabric Days is a new learning series built for data professionals. Now, this is going to start from the 4th of November, and you can sign up using your Microsoft account and easily add sessions to your calendar. There will be 16 live events in the series, and it's a great chance just to learn, connect, and grow, you know. It was quite easy. As you can see from the screenshot, I actually registered myself. Yeah, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what it will teach me. Hopefully, I'll come back and say a few things from what I'll learn. Next, so Kyle, Copilot for Dex Query View is now in GA. It is a game changer, even though I couldn't or I haven't fully tested it due to my licensing limitations. But what stood out for me was that since Copilot will be helping people write Dex queries, it will make it less intimidating for those who are new to it. I personally think it's a Dex queries are actually quite great, and they've kind of changed how I interact with the data, especially when I'm looking at new data. And also this is a great reminder to all of us to start optimizing our semantic models for Copilot, because the better the model is for Copilot, then the smarter your Copilot will be. Just a reminder that for you will need a Fabric license for Copilot F2 capacity or higher, and you need to deploy in a listed Fabric region. Next, auto expanding table columns. I know this is something that seems a bit simple or nothing big, but as someone who spent too much time resizing visuals, I was actually quite happy to see this. So there's a new grow to fit feature that automatically adjusts column widths to fill visual spaces. So you no more need to do manual tweaking just to clean and align your tables. You can still manually adjust the column if you wish to. Yeah, I felt like a surveyor at times. You know, I've actually used the ruler on my screen before, just trying to make sure all the columns are the right size. So yeah, I was actually quite happy for this new small feature. Then there's a performance analyzer on the web, so you can now analyze visual performances directly in the Power BI service. So you will no longer need to download desktop just to troubleshoot slow visuals. It will be a huge time saver for web-based report edits. This is still not out yet, but they said it will be coming out in the next few weeks. So this is something I'm looking forward to as someone who's been editing a lot of reports on the service lately. And then lastly, we have export query results in Power BI desktop. Now, this is a new feature which I'm looking forward to try. It is also something that you can only use on Fabric. So you will now be able to export clean transform data directly from Power Query to trusted destinations like Dataflow, Gen2, Lakehouses, and other cloud stores. You will no longer need third-party tools or complex workarounds, and it will all be done right from Power BI desktop, making data sharing faster, easier, and more consistent across Microsoft Fabric. Here are some useful links, with the one on the left being the feature update link, and the one on the right being the Power BI community link. Thanks everyone for your time. Yeah.
Nice work, Nolo. Thank you very much for that. I put Nolo under a bit of pressure to keep it short because we've got obviously lots to cover. So just maybe one mention that PowerPoint controller, the Power BI embedding into PowerPoint. It used to be quite painful if you had many, many slides. So now this whole controller add-in thing, I think is going to be something that's going to make people a lot happier. So anyway, just to mention that. I mean, Nolo mentioned it, but quite briefly. All right, thank you again, Nolo, for that. That was great. Kaylin, you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. I'll share my screen quickly. All right, cool. So just out of interest of time as well, in September, towards the end of September, I'm not sure for those who were at our last event, would have heard Sven speaking about the amazing things that were released at the Fabric conference later in September. Since then, there has been a significant amount of things that Fabric have come out with and a lot of new features. Due to time today, I didn't want to go into it all, otherwise we'd be here for 3 hours. So please, if you are interested and you want to know all of the amazing things that have been released since that conference, please navigate to the Microsoft Fabric blog. There are all of the different news that has come out labeled there, and you can also see some really nice demos and some tutorials as well. So I just wanted to narrow it down to 2 that I found the most exciting. So the first is extending the outbound access protection to Fabric Warehouse and SQL Analytics endpoints. This is now generally available. And basically, the release of outbound access protection, so OAP for short, for Fabric workspaces, we now have the ability to strictly control where outbound connections can be established. So basically, this helps us ensure data loads and queries across our workspaces are limited to trusted destinations to help us reduce risk and strengthen the governance within our workspaces. So it's a big benefit regarding consistency. It's also going to help improve governance at scale, and we'll have stronger security posture as well around our workspaces. All right, so setting it up, it's quite simple for now. You navigate to basically your workspace settings, and you can switch it on a workspace level, and then let Fabric enforce the boundary automatically. So it's really important to note at this stage, Warehouse and SQL endpoint outbound connections, they're limited to the current workspace. So only in upcoming releases will you see that get extended, where you can configure and allow lists that define exceptions to this. But unfortunately for now, that is the restriction. So if you are utilizing this, just be wary of that. For example of what I mean by this, copy into commands or bulk insert and open row set commands will only be allowed within the workspace boundaries. So that could be a limitation if you are trying to utilize it for specific exclusions. Then number 2, query and ingest JSON-L files in Data Warehouse and SQL Analytics endpoint for Lakehouse. So the open row set function can now read JSON-L format and easily ingest this into JSON-L files. So log files, social media streams, machine learning datasets, configuration files, and basically other semi-structured sources can now be ingested using this mechanism into your Lakehouse. So you have this versatile function that you can reference to query JSON-L files as if they were tables, which makes them a lot easier to use and work with, and then eliminating the need for this manual parsing and really complex transformation steps. So it's going to really streamline the way that we work. If you are working a lot with JSON files, this one's for you. So basically, it allows you to directly read one or multiple files as well. So it's not just one by one. You can do multiple at the same time, and you get row-based query results. So that's just a bit of a select that you can see for how you utilize this. And there are various tools that you can make use of to do this. So Fabric Query Editor, T-SQL Notebook, or even SSMS can now utilize this. It's a very powerful tool. It can enable data ingestion in various different scenarios. So you can create tables and then insert directly from those JSON files into your tables. So it will streamline efficiency if you're working with these. So this is just an example of some of the code that you can utilize to make use of this. If you do navigate, I've got the links here. We will be sharing this with you at the end of the presentations today. But if you do want to make use of this, or you are using it in your current environments, you can navigate to the links, and there's a full tutorial of how to get this set up, how to work with it, the limitations, the benefits, and all of those things. So yeah, that's the Fabric news for today. But as I mentioned, there is a lot of fantastic things that they've released in the last month. So please go check it out. There might be things that are super relevant to the work you're doing. So yeah, navigate there.
All right, very well done. Thank you, Kaylin. It sounds quite complicated to me. But anyway, I'm glad you're feeling comfortable with all of that stuff. Thank you for the Fabric news, Kaylin. All right, so now we're on to the main presentation of the afternoon. So a very, very big welcome to Abhinav Jayanti, Abby for short. Just to give you a little bit of background quickly, I didn't actually meet Abby, but I was in the audience at his presentation in Vienna at FabCon. Great presentation on change data capture. And so basically, I was really impressed with his presentation, his style, his knowledge, his experience. He actually does travel around the world giving presentations. So we're getting a sneak peek of his real-time intelligence presentation ahead of the chaps or the people at the past summit, which is in Seattle next month. So it's going to be great, I'm sure. And I'm looking forward to it. Just a quick intro in terms of Abby himself. So a data engineer based in Edinburgh, Scotland, at a company called Quorum. And I'm really excited to have you presenting for us. I'm going to hand it over to you. Have you got access to share? Are you able to go ahead from
It should
there?
do, yeah. I think I've got it here, yeah.
All right,
Perfect.
tremendous.
I'll just go ahead and click the button. Can everybody see my screen?
I can see it. Perfect.
Yep.
Thanks.
Fantastic. So, fantastic. Thanks very much. So, as Sven mentioned, yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to meet properly at FabCon, but I'm sure there'll be a conference where we can make that a reality at some point. But yeah, so I got a message from Sven and really, really enthusiastic about my presentation, which I always love to get because that's where I get the enjoyment from presenting as well, as people that come along and enjoy what I want to talk about, and that's where I have fun doing it as well. And so I've never visited down to South Africa as well, but hopefully virtuals to start with, and then maybe at some point I can make the trip down for a conference down there as well. But as Sven mentioned, I'll be off to Seattle very soon for past summit, and part of what we're presenting there is some content around real-time intelligence in Fabric. So my presentation today is a bit of a mix-up of all of my content that I usually present on this sort of stuff. This is kind of my niche of what I present in Fabric at the moment. So kind of, yeah, the raw materials and everything there. But if you follow along with most of what I present, you'll see a recurring theme there. So as Sven mentioned, my name is Abby Gianti. I go by Abby usually, and yeah, I'm based in Scotland, working for a consultancy called Quorum, and I've been at Quorum for about 3 years now, doing mostly data engineering. But I think we all know, as data professionals, your job can turn into one day you're building Power BI reports, and then the other day you're off troubleshooting some SQL queries on an on-prem server. So I wear many hats, but that's where I get the most enjoyment out of consultancy as well. So yeah, that's where I like to be. But today specifically, what are we talking about? So Fabric, everybody is on the hype train. As I say, it can't even be a hype train now because it's been about for a couple of years, but it's there's still so much more that hasn't been uncovered for Fabric, I find, with a lot of people usually. They often, I think, for those of us that were working with a platform as a service workloads for data engineering, so Azure Data Factory or notebooks or Synapse or whatever, you've got the familiarity of certain things in Fabric and the functionalities slowly coming, but real-time intelligence is dubbed as, I've heard someone from Microsoft call it a level 1 workload. So it sits alongside the data engineering toolset because it's something completely different within its own boundary of Fabric. But before I talk about what real-time intelligence actually is in Fabric, I kind of want to set the scene of why it's important to have these tools that can deal with large amounts of event-driven data, because I've been presenting around this topic for maybe about the last year or so frequently. And you often find that the moment you say streaming, IoT sensors, any of that sort of thing, people tend to tune out. They think, okay, I build batch-driven ETL pipelines. I build, my clients ask for reports to be refreshed in real time, but in reality, they're fine if, we can refresh a report 3 or 4 times a day and we're all good. But you often see that there can be lots of difficulties that you face when you're trying to work with time-based data. So what you see on the screen here is just a small diagram of certain sectors where you find more of this data. So you might have those of you who work with clients in any of these companies, or even work for the companies themselves, around manufacturing, energy, and retail. They've got processes that are running every single hour of every day, and the volume of data from these systems and processes can be in the millions every single hour. and you need infrastructure and tools that are able to keep up with that. And a good example that everyone, I think I start to see it click for a lot of people when you start to say is things like, start to think of it more as just event-driven data and how you can gain value from that. So even if you want to build a batch process, can you be a bit smarter with how you trigger that? Does it have to be on schedule? Can you only do things at certain hours of each day? Can you start to build processes where, okay, one stage of my ingestion is completed. Can I kick off the next stage straight away because that first stage is completed? That in itself is still an event-driven scenario that you can build with real-time intelligence. So it's important to me to make this distinction because a lot of people, I have seen a lot of people say, I don't really care about real-time data because I've got batch data, I've got small amounts of data. But Fabric and some of the components in there are now allowing you to build some more event-driven patterns into your solutions. And it's understanding an event is just something changing in your data, some scenario that's occurring. So from your data engineering processes, you're essentially saying, okay, pipeline is completed, that's an event. I want to kick off something else using that event. An example I often use for the type of data here is, for example, if you work for an airline, when I check in my bag, that creates an event, but I need that to be processed as soon as possible. There's no use if the airline system in the background processes me checking in 5 hours later, 6 hours later. My bag needs to make its way to the flight in the same time that I do over the next hour, hour and a half that I'm at the airport, which is why you need that process to kick off as soon as possible. And you need all the data surrounded to it. You need it to be concise in a transaction that's ready to be processed at your system downstream. So time-based data can often be very difficult to manage, but very critical for success. And I've covered a lot of the examples in the physical world there as well. You'll see on the right-hand side, we're talking about the digital world where all of your logging for cloud platforms, so things like activity logs, access logs, especially if you work in more of a security space, this is very important to you as well, because if you've got a malicious actor, if you've got any threats to your environment, if someone has a suspicious login, you cannot be reacting to that the next day. You need to be reacting to that as soon as it happens. So how can we build these systems and alerting and reporting on these incidents using these types of tools? And just a small side, this is one of the Microsoft kind of marketing things. And I think these figures have gone up as well from the size that they showed at FabCon as well. But it's essentially to say the scale of the data that we're trying to ingest here is going into the exabytes per month. And the number of events are in the trillions of just, and this is just real-time data that's being generated around the world as well. So I think what you have on the map there will be the data centers, for example, are generating tons and tons of logs every single day. So what we have on screen here right now is the Azure almost kind of product rundown for data analytics and data platform. What we've got here is you've got your traditional big data processing tools like data factories, data lakes. You've got your Azure SQL workloads, Cosmos DB, data exploration. I wouldn't really say that Power BI probably comes into that because it's a lot more than just exploring data. And you've got that whole section down there of real-time analytics. And I often find that a lot of people haven't ever really worked with event hubs and stream analytics and Kafka and all this sort of stuff, unless they've had a very niche specific use case because of the complexity of development. And it's harder to provision these resources. How does the costing and the throughput work for event hubs? I find that a lot of people generally lack the knowledge around these types of resources. And I often find that it's quite rare that people have built something end to end and are confident with their knowledge in these tools. Quite often, obviously, the people that come along to these sessions who are looking to look for more information on the real-time side of things. But as you can see, there's just too many options. There's how do you actually kind of find something that's a bit more concise and a bit more simpler to use. And that brings you into Fabric real-time intelligence. So the idea of Fabric is that it's driven by the business user. It's meant to be no to low code. It's meant to be easy to use. You're meant to be able to achieve most of what you want to do in the platform as a service world, but it removes some of the headaches around provisioning your resources and cost and all these sort of things. So a very quick rundown of what Fabric real-time intelligence actually is that you've got your real-time data platforms that I mentioned there. So event hubs, you can think of as sort of bucket for receiving your events and messages. Event grid is more of a push source, so you would use it for notifications, creating those and triggers for downstream processes. Stream analytics for any transformations of streaming data that's entering your Azure environment, and Data Explorer, which is more of a exploration and visualization tool for time series data. So a lot of people, again, as I said, haven't ever really came across them or used them in anger on the left there. But what it does in Fabric is you've got those, but you've also got everything that's beneficial for Fabric as well. So you've got the one lake, so all your data, all your event data is still stored in the same format where the rest of the one lake can be utilized to access it and analyze alongside. You've got Data Activator. I don't know how many people have played around with Activator in Fabric, but that comes under a lot of what is brought to Fabric by real-time intelligence. And you've still got Power BI as a visualization option for any of your event-driven data, which we can cover very shortly in the demo later on. And that's what brings you to real-time intelligence in Microsoft Fabric. In terms of questions, I'm happy for anybody to, if you want to raise your hand and ask a question, or just pop it into the chat. I've got the chat up on my screen here as well, so I can see that. I know that often with Virtual, it's it's the interaction can be quite disjointed sometimes, but I'm more than happy to stop in between and answer any questions, or we can have a chat about things later on at the end of the session as well. But once we get through the slides, once we're into the demo, we can keep it pretty free-flowing. So real-time intelligence can be broken down into your components for ingesting events, storing events, applying AI and copilots to them, because you can do that to absolutely everything these days, and then visualizing under real-time dashboards and having those actions and the rules, which I'll cover in a bit more detail later on. But that is the next level to what you're doing. So that's coming back to what I was saying with being able to trigger further actions and pipelines and everything using your events that are coming into Fabric. And that all sits on top of the real-time hub, where you can find all of these components and all this data. So before I get into the demo or anything, what I'll do is I'll give you a very quick rundown of the different types of components, because there's a lot of new terminology. And when I say that, I mean Microsoft likes to call things by their wacky brand new names, and then sometimes they change them and it's hard for us to keep up. Sometimes they change the spelling of them all the time. Sometimes they, I think there's still people to this day that refer to semantic models as data sets. You've got data flows, you've got data space flow, which is something different. You've got mapping data flows. Yeah, don't get me started on the rant there. But essentially, I've got a few slides here to just almost like a crib sheet for what the components of RTI are. So for storage, so when your events are actually coming into Fabric, where do you store them? We've got something called the event house. So you've got the lake house and the warehouse. In Fabric, you've got the event house. An event house is nothing but optimized storage for continuously ingested data, event-driven data, any time series data that should go to your event house in Fabric, because that will give you the best optimization for querying, storage, and anything that you want to do there. And under your event house, you've got a set of what are called KQL databases. And to keep it really, really simple, you can think of this almost as a sort of logical server is your event house, and your KQL databases are your databases that sit up on that server. So one event house can have many KQL databases. And as I said, all of it is optimized for time series data. And then you've got the real-time hub, which isn't as much a storage location in Fabric, but it is a location where you can find all of your real-time data. So those of you that build reports in Fabric, perhaps using things like the OneLake catalog, you can think of the real-time hub as the sort of version of the OneLake catalog for any streaming data and real-time data. So it's essentially just your place in Fabric to discover real-time sources. And there's a few other things there which I can show later on. And when it comes to ingesting events and processing them in Fabric, you've got the event streams. An event stream is a no low-code editor for ingesting and processing your events that are coming into Fabric. They've got native support for Azure Event Hub, so a lot of it is still built on the same architecture as the Azure resources, but obviously it's just brought to Fabric. And you've got various third-party sources that are being added to every single release for real-time intelligence. And then you've also got your activator, as I mentioned there. So this is for processing any events, monitoring the data that's coming into your Fabric estate, but also in your Power BI reports and dashboards for any changes or anomalies. And then you're able to trigger things like notifications off of this or even other Fabric items. And I'll show you some use cases of this later on as well. And finally, for any analysis and visualization in real-time intelligence, you want to be using you can use Power BI reports, as I said, so you are able to publish these directly from Event House data. They might not be as performant if you want them to be using something like direct query to your Event House. You need to have a lot of considerations when building that sort of model, because then you can start to get into a lot more problems with your queries and your Power BI report performance. So I would usually say that if you're building Power BI reports on top of real-time data, this is more for your historical forensic analysis, any trends that you're wanting to build up of your data. That's more than just what's happening right now. And if you want to do any analysis of what's happening right now, you can, if you want, write Kusto queries. And I will give you a little introduction to the Kusto query language, because it really isn't as scary as you might think. A lot of people will say, I don't want to have to learn a brand new query language, but you'll find that it is quite similar to what you already may have used if you come from a T-SQL background. So again, being able to run it against KQL databases, but anything you also kind of bring into your Event House, and running any queries for results is just the tip of the iceberg with Kusto, because you are able to do a lot more out of the box. It gives you inline visualizations, any anomaly detection, geospatial analysis. The number of functions that are available for Kusto are extensive because it's completely open source. And I could spend an entire session or even more talking about anything that you could do with just Kusto. But I think it's a really, really cool analytics toolkit, really, for this sort of thing, but also any other use cases that you might have. But what you'll probably end up doing is build real-time dashboards where you've got your single pane of glass for any real-time data that's coming in, and you can populate these tiles by writing those queries, and you can build in continuous refresh there. So I mentioned there that the KQL is what powers a lot of this in Fabric, and even the title of the session is Unlocking the Power of Real-Time Intelligence with KQL, because I think that's maybe something that people see as the barrier for starting to do anything with real-time data, is lack of knowledge around what the components are, how to build those sort of solutions, but also how can I then analyze it and how can I actually start to do things with that. And to do that, we use the Kusto query language. To give you a quick background for it, I've got an example here on the screen of just a regular SQL query. We've got select top from table, filter it down by using a where. You can run a group by for aggregations and an order by. This is pretty basic T-SQL query that you would run against any source that supports it. If you were to look at the KQL version of that, the Kusto query language version of SQL, the way you write your query is you give your table, you do the filter, you do the aggregation, you do the ordering, and then project is what you're selecting is. You can start to see here that actually it's not too different from the order in which you write SQL, but the whole point being, and more importantly, it's actually a lot more intuitive in the flow of what you're wanting to do to build a good result set. And what a lot of people might not know is that this is how SQL is actually, what you see on the right is how SQL actually executes your queries in the background. SQL goes and finds your table, filters it down, does the aggregations, does the ordering, and then presents the columns to you. But for some reason, every single SQL query that we write always starts with select. And I would guarantee, I would put money on the table to say that if you've got a table that you've never looked at and you're writing T-SQL queries for it, the first query you're going to write is going to be select top 1000 star from table by default. With KQL, that becomes a lot easier because you give the query engine the context of what you're looking at. So as soon as you give it the table, it then knows what columns are there. And the IntelliSense is brilliant for Kusto as well. So straight away, you're able to filter down into, okay, only give me these columns to look at. Okay, then give me the aggregations, roll up my results into what I want to look at, then order them, then project them, then limit them. And to give you a practical example of this, this is the exact same query written. The custom code is from when I was doing a presentation for Ireland, but essentially if you have a list of, let's say your column 1 was countries and you're wanting to just see number of records that you've got for a certain country. On SQL, you would be doing your select the column, your count star for your the actual aggregation for the count, selecting it from the table, and then you always have to have the group by at the end of the query. The way Kusto treats that is give me the table, filter it down to where this column fits that criteria. And then just in one line, I can do the aggregation. So instead of having to do select count and then alias it and then do the group by, you've got summarize is the clause. Count of calls there is my aliasing of what I have. And then it's essentially saying, give me the count, aggregate the count by this column. And the reason I've got that box around the project saying it's not actually needed is because by the time you've actually already done the aggregation, Kusto knows that that's what it's going to present to you. You don't need to then explicitly tell Kusto that these are the columns that you want, because those are what exist in your result set by the time you reach that line of code. So writing Kusto can be a lot more concise than T-SQL. And once you get a hang of it, once you understand the different types of clauses and operators to use, the Kusto query language becomes a lot more intuitive and easy to use. So what we'll do now is we'll actually jump over into a demo and we can see some of this in practice. Are there any questions at all before I go further? Just on any of the theory that I've covered there so far?
Abby, if you're going to get to it later, then you can cover it later. But that whole idea of processing the data, so some people might not be that comfortable with what that might mean. So maybe you can try and paint that picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so assume you mean around kind of, okay, how do you actually start to deal with the high volume of data and any sort of types and all this sort of stuff? Yeah. So the beauty of
basically just straight after ingestion, you had a processing stage or section, and we're just trying to sort of visualize what that would mean.
Absolutely, yeah. No, perfect, and that's exactly what this session is for as well. So what we have here is my Fabric workspace. So I've created a workspace specifically for this user group demo under just Joburg user group. And what we'll start off with is I'll show you the event stream component that we talked about there. So this is where you do all of your processing of any events. So if we go into the edit mode here, you start to see, so there's a number of sources that you can connect to directly in the event stream, and then you are able to apply transformations directly from the event stream. So what this is going to do is give you an output of your data, a preview, and then you're able to do any filtering or joining or aggregation of fields using these predefined transformations in the event stream, and then you've got the destination there. But I think to make this a bit easier, I'll show you, I've got a few example sources here that I've actually built up for the sake of this demo. So I took the liberty of, so whenever I do, Sven, you'll know this because you were in my session in Vienna, for my personal enjoyment completely, and maybe for the attendees, whenever I do a demo for a different country or any regional presentation, I like to have a demo that's related to something from that country. And my line manager at work is actually South African, and during the summer, especially when you ask him what he's doing at the weekend, he often says that he's having a big BRI, I want to say. Is that a good pronunciation?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Well done.
I'm seeing some applause there, yeah. So so whenever I ask Mark what he's up to at the weekend, he'll say he's having a big BRI. And so I thought, okay, I'm doing a presentation for South Africa. So what we'll do is a format that I often like to use. So our dummy source for today's presentation is a Python notebook that I've created to essentially generate fake social media posts around the topic of, in this instance, BRI. Because this is something you've got hundreds and thousands of messages, tweets, anything that might be coming out on this topic every single hour, and it might be something that you want to analyze, see the trends of. What are people talking about? What are the trends going on right now in the world? Who in the world is talking about South African barbecue sausage meats? So we've got so I won't go too much into detail on the actual Python notebook itself, but essentially we've got a bunch of libraries that we use. So the Faker library is for the data itself, but the Azure Event Hub library is what allows us to connect to the event, stream that I have, and then actually push those events and send them into what I have in Fabric. So you can use this sort of format for any custom sources that you might have, where you would want to be using this, but a lot of the time you do have native support for sources there as well. So actually what I'll do is I'll go back to the event stream and we can give you an idea of some of the sources that are available directly, so natively supported. So as I said, you've got the native support for Azure Event Hubs and IoT Hubs. But as you scroll down the list, you can see that there's options for, so what I spoke about in Vienna was the CDC element here. So you've got native support for capturing any changes from your Azure SQL databases, Azure SQL Managed Instance, Cosmos. You can pick up the change tracking from the databases and then bring those into Fabric as events. So what you can do then is, okay, say once this field or once this criteria is fulfilled for a change in my data, that of any data that I store in my SQL database, then start to process it and do something with it in Fabric. We've got support for any other clouds as well. So Google Cloud, there's some AWS sources available in here as well. And more interestingly, you've got what are called these Fabric events as well. So you can trigger and process any data around what's happening within your Fabric tenant as well. So the job events can be very handy, because say if you wanted to, so if you were to connect to this, basically in theory, what you would have is events coming into your event stream, your event processor, around anything that's happening with your pipelines and jobs. What are the statuses? Are they failing? Are they succeeding? And then you would store all of that in your event house.
In some cases. So what we then would then deliver the process, how we're going, what we.
Was that a question or okay?
No, sorry, please ignore that. Sorry.
It's maybe just me. No, all good, all good, all good. So, so essentially, for example, you would have your events. And to answer what your question was, Sven, when I say the processing, it's essentially any transformations, any manipulations that I want to do with these events, and then store them in the event house or send them to an activator, for example, as my destination. And the reason I want to do any transformations is because, so we'll take a look at the data here actually. So what I've been doing, because I've been running this notebook for the last half an hour or so. So you can see here that we've just got a timestamp, because all event-driven data needs a timestamp for you to be able to understand at what point it's actually, when did the event actually occur. I've then got a nested JSON of user data. So a username and IP address, what platform was it posted on, just for the sake of the demo. The text of what they've actually posted, the topic that it's posted under, and what language is it in. And that's this is my record of data that I'm sending to the event stream. And you can see that on purpose, I've done that with some nesting of JSON and everything, because this is what event data usually comes through as. It is just a large JSON message that's quite often nested down to even 3 or 4 levels. So event stream, Kusto, KQL, all of these are really, really good and built for unpacking those nested JSON messages. and doing some deeper analysis of that and giving it to you. So, and I'll show a little bit of that when it comes to the when it comes to actually writing some Custo. So you can see here that I've got you know, someone on Facebook just posted they went to their first spry and now they need a nap. So, and that happened whenever it was at 2:38, so a bit early in the day as well for having a barbecue. But you can see that this is the data that's coming into my event stream here. So if I come into here and preview my data, you can see here that, and obviously this is already actually quite clean in the way that I've generated it for the sake of the demo, but you can see a lot more nesting usually with this data. You can see a lot more fields that are brought into just this one field. And a lot of times with event-driven data as well, you can have very high duplication. So if you have sensors for your machines, for example, you quite often have, so if you're checking every minute to see the status of your manufacturing machines were running, or kind of your retail systems or whatever, you are going to have the same line of data for every single minute that occurs. You are going to say, okay, I'm good, because that's the type of data that you need to receive from the sensor. It's no good if you have your sensor only set up to send you when it fails, because what if how the sensor sends you the data fails? You don't know what's happening with your system, so you need it to give you the heartbeat essentially every single time. And that's how we build these event-driven scenarios, is by checking for those heartbeats and having the high duplication, the high volume of events that are coming in. So a lot of what you can do in here is to help you mitigate that, kind of save on storage as well. So we can do a lot of filtering here. So we can drop out any events that we don't really care about based on a criteria. So say, for example, if I had any other topic in here that I wasn't really that interested in. So say I want to, so at the moment in the data, I've not got any topics or languages that are different, but okay. Let's say all the English events should go off into a different destination to the ones that are in Afrikaans, for example, or French or German or whatever. I want to split that out into filter. All I need to do here is add a filter node, which is connected to this upstream event processor. Select a field to filter on. So say, for example, I want this topic there. And then we say keep events when the value equals. So in this case, this filter is going to do nothing because everything does equal Bri. But you can see there that this is what the node is going to do here. And that is what a lot of what you need to do with event-driven data and time series data is use things like these filters to drop as much traffic and noise as you can from the source, and then start to actually run analysis on what you filtered down to, what you've actually ended up ingesting and storing in your event house. Sven, I know that was a very long-winded way of getting to what you were asking, but hopefully that's given a bit more context as to how you can deal with events coming into Fabric. Perfect. So what we'll actually do here is we'll just do a little bit of tidy up, but then we'll actually get to analyzing. So as you can see, I said I've got here this nested user data field, and this is what Custo treats as a dynamic column type. But I want to be able to treat each of these as a column. I want to be able to run queries on IP addresses and platforms, for example. I want to say, okay, give me actually anything that's got anything from Facebook, anything from Blue Sky. So what I'm going to do here is add an operation called manage fields. And what the manage fields essentially does is it's your opportunity to change any types and bring out any data from nested fields that you have in your data. So if I go down to the field drop down here, you can see here that there's a little arrow beside the user data column there. And you can see that it's got the table icon. This says to me that it's a dynamic field. If I was to bring that out, all I need to do, so essentially what I'm doing here is I need to take any fields that I want to keep or work with or change. So I want to keep my timestamp. I want to keep the text and the topic and the language. I don't care about these internal fields around partitioning and processing and queuing. There are some other built-in functions here as well. So instead of picking the user data field, if all I do here is select the username, IP address, and platform, I'll add them in, and all of them are just text at the moment, and I'm not really going to make any changes to that. If I wanted to, I could change the IP address to be, instead of a string, it would be a real type or whatever. But for the sake of this demo, I'm not going to go as far as getting into type changes because that can cause some weird bugs sometimes. I've noticed you don't get it quite right, but you can start to do this. So you can, what we're essentially doing here is building up a sort of schema for what we want our stored kind of destination events to look like. Because with event-driven data, a lot of times you can get schema changes quite often. You can have kind of gaps in data for a few columns, which you might expect. So doing something like a manage fields lets you take something that's a lot more flexible and not quite rigid and structured when it's coming in raw. And by this point, you're actually conforming it to something that you want to build. And I think there's a lot more functionality coming as well for event streams and kind of event schemas. Event schemas are a thing in Fabric as well, but I'm not going to touch on them today. But building up something that is a lot more conformed so that you're able to actually start querying it and build reports on it that can be reliable. So what I've done here is I have got all of my fields here, and I've done that. So I can save that. I think it's already saved. Maybe it's not saved. So we'll just close that and try again. Didn't quite like what it did there. So again, what I'm doing is I'm just taking 3 fields that I wanted to pull out of that field. And what I'm actually doing here is dropping that user data field by not ticking it. So if I was to go ahead and save this, add them in, and then save them. And then at any point when you do a transformation in the event stream, what you want to do is do a derived stream here. And then what you can do is you can pick up this derived stream. What's going on there? And then if we just refresh that there, look at the preview of the data. Sometimes it's just take a little bit. You can see here that I've got the username, the IP address, and the platform as columns that I can actually analyze here. And then I don't need to work with any JSON data there. So what we'll go ahead and do is add this into the destination as our event house that we have. And for the sake of this, I did already create one. In my Joburg user group, I've got an event house called EH Messages. Going to be that KQL table. And I'm going to create a table called ghosts for this. And then we can go ahead and analyze some of them. If we do this, if we hit save and we hit publish, as soon as that event house destination goes green to say that it's active, we are sending those events into that event house. And you can build this topology to be as complex as you need it to be for any transformations that you do. Sven, very quickly, can I just double check how much time we've got left? Because I know that we started a bit earlier, we had the news and everything. I just wanted to make sure that I don't run over.
Yes, theoretically we end at 6, and obviously some people might have to drop off, but I'm certainly very intrigued to watch as much as you have for us. So please feel free to go. Yeah. Just so at the moment we're at 4. So what we can do is we can kind of spend another 10-15 minutes just looking around some of the analysis with the KQL, and then we will jump into some dashboards and show some things there as well, because I know that we have spent a bit more time on the event processing side of things. But it's all good stuff, and it seems that we do have a enthusiastic audience as well. So I'm more than happy to stay for an extra 10 minutes to do that. Yeah. So I just wasn't too sure because the starting times and everything were a bit different with the segments at the start. So it's all good.
So what we'll do is we're still waiting on this loading into our event house, but what we can do is, I might want to bring in a different type of source as well as this post data to say, okay, what do I want to build a dashboard up on? So what I did was I created another weather stream, another event stream to bring in data from the weather source in Fabric for real-time intelligence, which is essentially a public feed of weather data. And I've got it set to just Johannesburg. So apparently, I don't know if you can verify this for me. Apparently, it's mostly cloudy and not raining at the moment, but I'm not too sure how
Perfectly
up to date or
correct.
accurate that may be.
Perfectly
Is it?
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
There we
Not
go.
yet raining, but very cloudy, that's for sure.
Well, I looked at this half an hour ago and it said thunderstorm, so I wasn't quite sure.
Well, Kaylin's area, yes. My area, not so much.
Okay, that's good to know. So again, so yes, we've got this transform weather data here, and this comes back to what I said with how you can have a lot of volume of a lot of duplication there. So you can see how the temperature has been changing over the past hour or so here. Yeah, there we go. There's our thunderstorm records there as well. But again, here I had this as a derived stream. The point of the derived stream is basically that it's where you can pick up the data once it's been transformed, and this is available to you in the real-time hub as well to connect to. But what I need to do here is I need to give this a destination as well, because another important point is that all of this that I've been showing you up until now, the events have been queuing up in my event stream. I've not actually put them anywhere yet. They are going to build up and build up and build up in the event stream until I give it a destination where they can go through. Sometimes it is kind of like opening the floodgates with some of this in terms of how much time you take to build up your processing. But the whole point is that they have obviously the less transformations that you can do. If you have somewhere to store your raw events, you're not going to have any sort of data loss. And I think there are some SLAs around that for the event streams as well, for how much queued data you can actually have. And you can mess about with the policies for caching and retention as well if you wanted to. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and publish my separate stream. And it's always a good idea to do a separate stream for a separate type of source, essentially, because you might just have different transformations and anything to apply. You only have one event processor for any event stream, but I believe you can build up to 11 combined sources and destinations in any event stream. So you are limited per event stream, but there's nothing stopping you just creating another one for a different type of source, but piping them into the same event house. So if we go over to the event house here, very quickly, we'll just go into, you can see a bit of an overview of ingestion, but if we go to the database, fingers crossed, yes, we've started ingesting some rows here. And you can see here that there's already some compression happening. So at the moment, we've not got much data coming in. So the compression ratio is quite high. That's actually lying because that's not, I think it just needs to refresh. But usually you see, yeah, you can see the original data size and the compressed data size. What's important is that you're only charged for the storage of the compressed data in Event House. You're not charged for the raw original number of ingested data in your Event House, which is very important. That is a bug because I've not seen that before, because 29 is higher than 18. That's not compression, that's the opposite. But we'll just ignore that and move on, because such things can happen in Fabric, and let's not take too much time to focus on that. One point very quickly to raise while we're here is that you have this one lake availability tick box. And what this essentially does is take the event data that's coming into your event house, writes them as Parquet files to the one lake, so that you're then able to query this data in your lakehouse or your warehouse across Fabric. So because it's writing to the same Delta format that the one lake sits on, you are able to query all of your event data elsewhere apart from the event house. So say you don't want to use KQL, if you want to write a Spark notebook to look at this data from your lakehouse, you can still do that by taking the one lake availability here. What it's doing is it's essentially grouping up all the data, writing it to a Parquet file that can then be mirrored into your one lake And then there's a few nuances with how it happens in the background, but it does give you the stats here around where it's copying them to, what the latency is, how much they have, how much it still has to kind of send over. So that's quite interesting there. So I'll take a quick look at the weather streams just to make sure that the destination is active, and this one should be active as well. If we go into the event house here, we've got our two tables, we've got posts and weather data. So coming back to that KQL query language theory that I ran through, you can write what is called a query set in Fabric to look at your tables. So what we have here is just an out-the-box query to look at any records that have been ingested in the last hour. And you can see here that I've got all my nice data that's been broken down into those columns that as I transform them. But what you can do if you wanted to look at just any random records, we've got the same syntax here as I showed you in the PowerPoint. We've got the table name and then the pipe. We are able to use the clause called take 100, which is just any random 100 records that you can see here in the query result. And you've got all of that there for you. I'll skip over a few of these just with the interest of time, but you can do things like looking at the schema. So we can do a count of topic here. So topic's not going to be actually very interesting because it's all just the same topic for BRI. So what we'll do is I'll actually turn this into a platform query. But again, all I want to do to get a count of number of records for any platform is just a summarize count by platform. If I go ahead and run this, you can see here that we've got pretty equal because the randomizer will just keep it pretty equal across the platforms. But you can see how easy it is to build that query there with not a lot of effort and not a lot of code. The great thing about Event House, though, is if you are still very scared of KQL, even after all the fantastic learning material I've given you, it does support native T-SQL. So you are still able to write T-SQL, but you can see here that the IntelliSense is not there that you have writing KQL. So you can see here, and the query performance might be a little degraded as well. But what you can do, and this is always something I show when I'm showing KQL, even if I've got anything else to cover, is what can save you here is just adding a small explain clause in front of your T-SQL query. And if you run this block, the result it actually gives you is the KQL query that you can run as the equivalent. So this is really, really handy for when it comes to if you're not quite sure what the KQL query is, you can use this translation feature essentially, and it gives you all the code. So even if I've said star here, it makes me quite happy because it lists the columns for me. Because if we're good developers, we should never be writing star in our code or outputting result sets. So this is how you can mitigate that, and it gives you the right good syntax for KQL as well. It's very good. So I'm not going to do anything around enrichment or functions or anything in Custo, but there are a few things that you can do to enrich this data from Custo and build up these materialized views and functions. So a function is essentially just any enrichment that you have using the Custo query language that you can then save to another table if you wanted to. So you can see people build medallion architectures a lot with this event-driven data. You just have to write some functions that expand some of those events. So it's actually the code version of what I showed you in the event stream. That is some of what was happening here with the extends. And the materialized views as well are very cool because they're essentially they're persisted views of the events. So you can build in kind of any sort of logic there. But I'll skip past all of this because I want to just very quickly show you the built-in visualizations that you can do with Custo. So what we'll do here is we'll just run the same query that we had, so the count by platform. You've got this here. But what we can do, if we really wanted to, is while we're writing the queries here, we can run just by using the render clause, you can build charts and visualizations directly from Kusto as well, which I find really, really cool. So what we'll do here is we'll do a bar chart. This is always the time in the presentation where an attendee says build a pie chart, and I say get out, because we should never be building pie charts. But you can see here that we've got the bar chart that's created in our query set right here, and I can do any of the visual formatting here, which is really, really useful. But what I want to do is actually I want to save this as a dashboard. I want to be able to view how many tweets I have for this, sorry, how many posts I have per platform at any given time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a real-time dashboard. We're going to call this Bry, and this is platform count. So once I do this, what we can see on our dashboard here is for the time range of the last hour, because we've not been ingesting for hours and hours and hours, you can see that in the last 15 minutes, this is how much we actually have. But you can set this to be continuous, continuously refreshing. So as I refresh it there, you can see that as we ingest more and more, you can see the lines start to change very slightly. If I just go into editing mode here, and if I pick auto refresh here, continuous intervals, continuous refresh. Now it's going to refresh for me automatically, and currently I am visualizing to you how many that my platform count query is being refreshed to you in real time. My hands are off the keyboard. I'm not spamming the refresh button. The dashboard is doing it for me. So this is a really, really intuitive, cool way to build up these dashboards from your event-driven data. And what we can do here is write any alerts from the activator as well. So there's one last thing that I'll show you, and then we can cover off any other things that we might want to look at. So if I go back to my query set, because as you can remember, I brought in the web. I think I just had a sharp blip in my Wi-Fi there. So we're back to the Kiko query set. So if I go right down to the bottom here, I've got a, okay, there's something different happening here. Was it? Yeah. So what I've got here is a query that essentially gives me the temperature right now. So you can see, so what I'm doing here is essentially I've run a summarized by, so I'm saying, give me the temperature value for any timestamp. So this has been ingesting just for the last 15 minutes or so. So at the moment, apparently the weather for you is a nice 17 degrees. I'm jealous because that's definitely much warmer than it is here in Scotland at the moment. But so this weather data table just has a few other fields. I don't think I actually showed anything of what was in it, but you've got the description, the temperature, and then some other information around direction and speed as well. But what I've actually done here in the query is I have ordered it so that I get the most recent values. And then what I'm doing is I'm projecting just the value for the temperature and then limiting it by 1. The reason I've done this is because I'm going to save it to my existing dashboard, which I need to select it. So it's going to be RTD Bry. My tile name is going to be current temp. If I do this, what this does when it opens the query, and it'd be good if it's already figured out what visual type to apply to it. So at the moment, it's a table. It is a table type visual. If I go into the editing, I can see here that if I was to edit this, instead of a visual type of table, I want it to be a stat, which is essentially just a card visual. And then I can apply the change there. So I can see here, I've got this nice big box, which is telling me the current temperature. We can do things like conditional formatting. So let's say, so Sven, what would you say the ideal temperature is to have a braai? When you look at the forecast, you say, okay, it's going to be this temperature. This means we can have a braai.
I know you think 17 is quite warm, but for us in summer, I don't think many of us would be braaiing in this weather. So
okay, so you wouldn't be
25
braaiing at
degrees,
17.
yeah.
So
What do you think?
25.
Yes.
So when we take our max temperature here, I want that to be over 25. And we can say, okay, the color style is going to be that. Okay, let's say it's going to be green when it's that temperature. But sadly, it's not 25, so it can't do that. So let's do another rule to say whenever our temperature value is less than 25, nice color of red, and we'll say no braai. And
I know someone who braais nearly every single night. It doesn't matter what the weather is. He's out there. That's the way it is. Yeah.
So maybe this dashboard isn't for him, but we can see here that we've got the conditional formatting there as well. So because it's under 25, sadly, there's no braai this evening. But let's take that a step further. So let's say, Sven, you want to be notified whenever the temperature does cross that 25 degrees threshold, and you can actually, you want Fabric to tell you that you can go out and do that braai. What we're going to do is we're going to set an alert from here. And this is the activator element that I touched on. So this is to say, hey, let's check the weather. Let's run this query that I built up there. So let's check it every 30 minutes. And whenever that max temperature value is, so again, we can set a different threshold here. So let's say 24 is acceptable, I'd say, instead of 25. I can get it to send me an email, message me in Teams, or go off and run another Fabric item. So when it says Fabric item, I can have it run a pipeline or a notebook that I might have somewhere else in my Fabric environment. So you can have this process. So the events that I've ingested, so the weather data, the public feed coming into the event house, I put it on the dashboard. From the dashboard level, I'm able to create something that's a lot more reactive to the data that's coming in, and I'm able to actually do something. So I might have some other processes that run off the back of this condition being met. And this is what I want to do. So I can run that from there, which I think it's almost like the next level, because it takes your batch data pipelines that you run, instead of waiting for the schedule or waiting for something else to ingest. I've had it before where if you have a spike in ingestion, for example, for your first initial pipeline, and that one runs into the next one, if you don't have your scheduling quite right, sometimes you can say, okay, hey, my data ingestion last night didn't actually get as far as it should have. You can change that. You can say, okay, alert me when that happens. Alert me when you think we've not had as much data ingested as we should do, but also go off and run this other pipeline that fixes that. Or let's say, okay, start this other pipeline as soon as this condition is met. Instead of saying, okay, once we get all the data in, we're going to check for conditions, and then we're going to go off and run all these downstream processes. It becomes a lot more intuitive, a lot more, it reduces the headaches around scheduling, but within reason as well, obviously, because you need to be able to, you still need to think about kind of contention and all that sort of stuff there. But yeah, very quick whirlwind tour of real-time intelligence in Fabric. But hopefully kind of simple enough, hopefully kind of slow start to how you can do things. So yeah, as you can see here, I've got the transformed data that I transformed in my event stream there. I can access that from here and build anything on top of it. But yeah, you can see there that you've got some insights as to how much data you've got coming in and what the data actually is. So you can build some really, really cool things with real-time intelligence.
Well, I think that was fantastic. Thank you. I love that. I'm sure everyone will agree. The accent was brilliant. I really enjoyed that sophisticated accent. But on top of that, the content was amazing, very practical, very relevant to us. So I really do appreciate the time you put into making this presentation just so enjoyable certainly for me. Are there any questions from the audience? Obviously, people are you're welcome to ask. Abby, I know we scheduled you for a particular slot, and now you're still at work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
yeah.
no, I'm absolutely fine. I was just looking at the time there. I think where I was still around the kind of hour of what I had planned to show after the initial slot. So my only consideration was just in case anybody else, if you're running over on your side, but I'm absolutely good. I'm all good.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there questions or comments? Anything you want to say? I see there's some emojis going around, but I mean, just maybe I can just say that there are obviously some companies that say, oh well, I don't have any IoT devices, and as a result, I mean, you made this point. Event streams and real-time intelligence actually could easily still be usable for them based on just even that whole orchestration section. Fabric, one item can kick off when the next one happens because of streaming the data through the event.
Exactly, yeah. So the CDC alone for me was, that this is kind of what prompted me to do the session in Vienna around this. And then that turned out to be because they just announced the copy job. I ended up presenting that as well. But if you look at the source here, if I was to hook up to a kind of database CDC source, so I say, okay, give me the changes from this Azure SQL database, and bring those in. So instead of writing my own pipeline to have to deal with any of those incremental changes, I've got the change tracking, I've got the data coming into Fabric here. You are able to add, so that alerting thing that I showed you there, you're able to add an activator as a destination. You can do it from the ingestion. You are able to pipe these events into this activator and then write all your thresholds and everything and your conditions and everything there as well. So you don't even need to go as far as building a report or anything. I think, yeah, as you say, Sven, you can just build an event stream that's ingesting something and then have it go to an activator, have your activator go and run a pipeline for you whenever a threshold is met. And straight away, you'll see the value of building something like this instead of saying, okay, I need to have pipeline 1 run it 6:05, but I then need this to run it 6:20 or whatever. You start to take that headache out. I see a raised hand there in the audience.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, sorry. And for the end, if there's room for questions or comments.
Go ahead, Sia, go for it.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you, Sven. Firstly, I just like to say, Abby, thank you. That presentation was brilliantly done. I couldn't stop smiling, actually, just seeing the things you were showing. It's almost like I was getting, there's this advert from a guy in America called, I think, was it Billy Mays, who kept saying, and there's more, and there's more. It's like every time you're showing something, it's like you're showing more, you're showing more.
As well, to be fair. Like there's so many things that I haven't covered because I kind of ran through the time there. But no, really thank you for that. Yeah.
No, man, really enjoyed the presentation. I mean, this is something that I also do from a data engineering perspective for one of our clients where they predominantly work within the Azure Synapse space. And a lot of the stuff that you showed actually links to what I do there with like the pipelines, the notebooks, and seeing it in this way actually now gives me ideas in terms of some of the things that can be possible for this client, where a lot of the ingestions that we get come through API calls that we still store as JSONs that then still get further processed. And I was worried now because I'm seeing the query is growing from, it used to take about a couple of minutes to execute, and it's now almost an hour daily. So looking at something like this could actually propose some solutions that could help with that data growth and making those ingestions take longer than they need to, because I also stage it in a way that as soon as one pipeline has done processing, the other can wait for like half an hour before executing. But now that half an hour window is getting smaller and smaller with this ingestion taking longer and longer.
So if you do it, so that's where the activator really becomes handy. Yeah, absolutely. And you can do a lot more of you can use some of the Custo elements for doing some of that processing of the ingestion as well. One thing I briefly mentioned Azure Data Explorer, and I'll quickly show it now because it's, in my opinion, very cool. Because dataexplorer.azure.com, I'll put this in the chat, because you do not need an Azure subscription to do some of what I've shown you. So it does come with caveats. There's no activator in here, but Azure Data Explorer allows you to ingest sample data, analyze it with KQL, and build dashboards. So anything I showed with that element there, you are able to pipe them into an Azure Data Explorer cluster. So yeah, unfortunately for the activator side of things, you will need a Fabric capacity. But what you can do is you can still use Azure Data Explorer. They do give you a free cluster for you to get started off with. And you can still connect to this actually from Fabric as well. And the reason I bring this up for yourself, actually, is because in Synapse, you can also spin up a Data Explorer pool and do some of this as well. So I don't know if maybe this would be useful for you if you have data that's sitting in Synapse already, maybe to start to ingest it into the pool. It can get quite expensive, as most Synapse pools can get, but maybe that's worth checking out as well, is some of the Data Explorer elements. But if you guys are doing Fabric already as well, then there's no reason you can't do any of the other stuff I showed you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much, Abby.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, any other questions? I mustn't forget, let me just quickly share my screen for the survey afterwards. There's the feedback survey. Please do fill that in. Thank you again to Nolo for your presentation, to Kaylin for yours, and then a very, very big thank you to Abby. You put a lot of effort into that. It was fantastic, and thank you for joining us with the BRI feature as well. That was fantastic. I'm looking out the window. If your real-time
I'll keep my boss happy there.
Temperature was going for it, I'm sure the temperature's dropping. It's getting darker.
I'm afraid the dashboard is still red. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still red. Exactly right. Yeah.
I was gonna say, if you have any other questions, I'm gonna throw. I just saw so Michael Johnson is. I see you are here. I met Michael actually at the past summit a couple of years ago in Seattle. So if you can't get a hold of me, I think he's much more local to you. Go ask him all of your questions, because I know that he presents on Kusto as well. But yeah, sorry. Hello, Michael. Good to see you.
Hello, how's it going? Long time.
Are you going to be at PASS this year?
I am not.
Unfortunately. Okay.
Yeah.
But no, good. It's nice to. I was going to say it's a familiar name anyway, because I knew you were based down this way as well. So, but yeah, no. Everybody go ask Michael, because he's done presentations on Kusto as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's definitely our black belt in South Africa. So he's the guy. All right, excellent. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us for the October event. Don't forget the November and January events with our big AI presentations from Tableau, Click, SAP Analytics Cloud, and Microsoft. So that should be great. And have yourselves a wonderful evening, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.